Welcome to our weekly meeting for our software supply chain security group. Today I just wanted to talk through a few of the changes that we're making to our priorities list. I recently got some feedback and realized there are a couple of gaps that we're going to want to address. Let me pull these up. Sorry, I don't have this already. And I assume, Aaron, that probably you probably wouldn't start work on these until like 16.7 at the earliest, because we're trying to finish out all of that container signing work. And then also I'm still hoping to get somebody identified from the runner team to help do a research spike. So that would be the other big task here for this milestone, is to pair with them on that research spike. But once that work's done, this would really be the next item on the list, are these two things that I just dropped in. So let me share my screen. Hey, Nate, you joined. And I thought I would just talk through these a little bit, as well as the reasons why, and then I wanted to get any feedback that you might have on the requirements before I go, working on getting UX designs done and validating it anymore if needed. So it's all ready for development later on. So this first one is storing a source value for jobs. So right now we store a source value for pipelines, but we don't do that for jobs. And so there's no way for, given a certain job ID, there's no way to know whether that came from the developer's pipeline or whether that came from a scan execution policy, or like, where did that job come from? How was it triggered? And who had control over the definition of the job is the really big thing there. And so specifically, like GitHub Actions, for example, lets you define these actions that have defined inputs, and then they provide an output. But it provides a little bit more separation where the people who are calling the action can't change or modify the scripts that are run as part of that action. And we don't really have this inside of GitLab, except for scan execution policies is really the most similar thing to that, where you can actually define a scan to be run. In this case, it's limited to scans, but we're working to add support for any CI jobs that you might define. And then that'll actually get enforced on the pipeline so that the developers can't modify or change that job. And so we have a use case. The use case I heard most recently was from a customer who wanted to run a container scanning job and then sign the output, because right now it produces the scan results as a build artifact file. Sign the output, and then they wanted to know that the developers hadn't gone and just run another job later on to go modify the results of that. And they could run container scanning with our scan execution policies today using compliance pipelines, or on our roadmap, we have plans to support custom YAML. They could go in and sign that build artifact, but there's no way to prevent the user from just spinning up another job and then creating a file and signing that file and calling it the same thing. So the proposal here is to add this new source value. It should be returned in the API. It should be filterable. Like if you go, I don't think you'll even need any front end work for this. It might even just happen. Maybe you'll need a small amount. But like today on this jobs page, you can filter by status, and that's pretty much it. Whereas on the pipelines page, because we do store the source, you can actually come in and filter by anything in this big long list. And you can even see if the pipeline was caused by a security policy, right? So the idea is to add this same sort of filter onto the jobs page as well. And then probably the biggest thing is ideally we'll actually store that in our ID token claims so that users can just validate that via policy. Ideally, they wouldn't even have to call the API. So specifically for us, it's these requirements 5 and 6 that we're most interested in. requirements 4 through 6 that we're most interested in. I think 1 through 3 are more like nice to haves, but the idea is that in our ID token claims, we're providing all of this data, we're providing the job ID, but we provide a couple extra parameters in here as well to show, the big one is that we would add a job source, which would show if it came from a security policy or not. And then if it did come from a security policy, we'd have this job policy ref URI that would point to the security policy project that was used to run it with. And then this would just be a SHA, a ref SHA to match, kind of like what we've done with the CI config, for example. It has a ref UI and a SHA. Okay, so that's the proposal for that one. Are there any questions or comments or feedback? Very open to feedback on this, since obviously I just opened this 2 days ago. I just wanted to get some early eyes on it.
I guess the only question I had was, what are the other source values? Like, we talk about policies here a lot, but what are the other possible values? Just to make sure that that's,
Yeah, so the other values, I think for everything else, we can just inherit it from the value that's had for the pipeline. And there's a big long list of values there. In our docs, there's, you can trigger a pipeline through the API. You can trigger it through chat. Apparently, there's more in here than I'm even personally familiar with, through the web IDE or on-demand DAST scan or a merge request event. So there's like all these different ways to trigger pipelines. The thing is that not all of the jobs, if you're enforcing a job from a security policy project, then actually that job should have a value that's different from the source for the pipeline as a whole. And that's something that we're missing today.
Yeah, I didn't know about half those either, but there we go. And you got the ref and the SHA there as well, so
cool. Yeah, exactly. Okay, and then the second thing is also just trying to help compliance teams lock things down a little bit more. There are 1,001 ways that creative developers can set environment variables and have that manipulate what's happened, what action actually takes place in a given job. And right now in our scan execution policies, we let you define variables that get set, but we don't let you block variables that are not defined. And so the proposal here is just to take this one step further, where you could actually have a setting that to go through and unset any variable that's not defined in the scan execution policy job, so that it would not interfere. So, rather than trying to put the burden on the security and compliance team to think of every single variable that might potentially influence things, instead they can just define the variables they care about and check this box, and that's going to make sure that everything else is unset. And there may be some variables that you actually do want to let developers configure as defined inputs, and that's where we would want to have an exception list in place. So you can say, I want to unset everything except for this one variable is the one thing that I'm going to let the developers control, because I know how that behaves and that's a defined input for me. So that's the proposal here. I think what this is going to do, both of these in conjunction with each other, are going to get it to a place where if a compliance team wants to actually enforce that a specific job is run and they want to verify that the output came from that job that they wrote rather than a developer's job, these two things together would give them that ability, so that they could, like I said in that example, like run a container scan, sign the output and then be able to verify that that actually came from the compliance job rather than from the developer's job, and that no developer set environmental variables came to interfere with things. Nate, you look like you have a comment.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think it through. Like, I'm just trying to wonder if
Yeah.
there's a lot to unpick here. I guess one of the big things as well is what will come out of the design side of this. So where it actually fits into the scan execution policies, UI, and that side of things. I think from a
Yeah.
development perspective, I guess the unsetting of variables would be reasonably like it's a simple concept. But yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. So this is in workflow design. So since this falls within the security policy team, actually Grant and Camellia are going to work together on designs for this. So we will have designs hopefully before, engineering work actually starts on it. This epic, I don't think really requires designs because not really any new UI here other than that filter, but that's a pretty well established paradigm. And like I said, I don't know how many front end changes are even required for that. It may just be returning the right things on the back end may just make the filtering work. So it's possible this will need some front end work, but I don't think we need designs. On this one, as far as designs go, I can tell you sort of what I have in mind, but ultimately it's going to be up to Grant and Camellia to design it.
Yeah. And then I guess Grant has already been, it will be verifying that it doesn't, because the other question I have is how it will affect other policies, like whether that will have like ongoing effect for other policies that users have created that require those variables. And I guess that's
So
where the
it should, this statement right here, this setting should be scoped only to just that scan execution policy. So we should not unset variables outside of the jobs that are defined as part of that specific scan execution policy. So that's a really important thing to know, because you don't want that to bleed over and like unset variables in the developer's pipeline, or if you have a separate policy that, like you don't want to have that cross contamination, so to speak. So like it should all be scoped only to that policy.
okay, yeah, I missed that line, which was
Yeah,
very
that's all
important.
good.
Following that.
And then as far as designs, this is a related design, but they've been introducing this concept of a few settings that apply at the bottom of the policy. And this is for something else, but I think we might use the same concept where there might be a checkbox here at the bottom of the policy that says, check this if you want to unset all other variables, and then you would probably get, some option beneath that if you wanted to create exceptions. The nice thing though about the policies is that it's YAML first, and so we actually could just add to the YAML syntax to support it on the back end, and then we can add the front end support later. So you could actually fully deliver this epic even without front end changes, and then we could handle the front end changes completely separately if we'd like. Once you have support for the right, it's our own custom defined YAML syntax structure. So you would define the key value pairs that would set those settings essentially.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Do we need to get pipeline author in as well? I guess we will once we get to the engineering group.
That's a good question. Yeah, both of these actually, like, they have overlap with security policies, but they also have a lot of overlap with pipeline authoring. I don't know how much we need to involve them or not. It seems like these things are pretty mostly just extensible off of what we've already got, but I did put, it does overlap with pipeline authoring. I'm not sure who we need to include from that side or to what extent. Like I can reach out to their PM, but I think mostly we just want to make sure that if we did make a database change to add a new column for source, with that, what are the implications of that? Is that going to cause any performance problems? I don't know how big that table is. If it's a small table, it's probably not a big deal. If it's a really big table, then we probably need to coordinate more.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool.
So yeah, I can start up a thread in their Slack maybe, or just tag their PM into this issue and kind of feel it out and see how much coordination we need, or if they're mostly just good for us to proceed here.
Yeah, I feel like this one would be more of a FYI. That one just feels more extensible, unless there is something that I don't know. But the other one, adding new variables, we'll just need to coordinate a little bit, but that's fine.
So this one I actually marked no. I thought that this would not impact the pipeline authoring team. Maybe I thought wrong here. That would be good feedback to know. But we're actually not extending out like the standard GitLab CI syntax. We'd be extending the security policy YAML syntax. So that's why I think we'd mostly just need to work with the security policy group on this.
Perfect. Yep, that works then.
And yeah, this would not affect CI at large. Again, like these changes should be scoped to only affect scan execution policy jobs. So I think we don't need to coordinate with verify on this one, but famous last words, I guess, right?
Yeah, no, yeah, that makes sense. Just scoping it just to scan execution policies, and yeah, and obviously Grant's heavily involved in this early on, so I think we'll
Right.
be fine. Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's all I had to share for today. Again, I would imagine both of these we probably wouldn't start development until 16.7 at the earliest, depending on where this research spike with the runner team goes, since that's really the next thing on the priority list. Once we get somebody identified from that team, I'm assuming that'll take the rest of 16.6. But yeah, a couple tentative plans to start on in 16.7.
Right. And just to reiterate, 16.6 is a shorter
It
time frame as
is.
well, 2 or 3 weeks. So just to be aware of that.
Yep. I agree. I think especially where we haven't yet heard back from the runner team on exactly which engineer is supporting us on that research spike, I could easily see that spilling over into 16.7 and then this spilling over into 16.8. But regardless whether it's next month or after, I guess, Aaron, once you're out of work to do, this would be the next thing on the list to go pick up whenever that is.
Yeah, just to jump here, thank you for going through this, because I mean it all makes pretty good sense to me at a higher level. There's a lot of areas here like scan execution policies that I'm not as familiar with, so I don't really have a lot of specific questions, but I'll have time to brush up on all of those areas before this gets started, and we can help out with the and all that. Just to update currently, all the current work for the UX is still kind of where it was last week. We're just pushing everything through review on the registry side, so just keeping an eye on that process. So it's kind of have some bandwidth to start looking at other things while that's happening this week.
Okay. Well, yeah, if you're looking for something to pick up, you probably could go ahead and start refining either of these, or I don't know if you want to start in on that research spike without help from the runner team, but that would be another thing, is like if you wanted to just start coming up to speed on all of that so that you were ready.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Probably be the better choice. Yeah, I would start there, but if all else fails and you're out of work, then we can start refining these ones, I suppose. But I'm totally fine if these sit and wait, another month or two. All right. Well, thanks everyone. That's all I have for today. Is there anything else that either of you would like to discuss? All
No,
right.
thanks.
Well, have a great week, everyone. I'll talk to you later.
Gotcha.
Thank you.